Hi, and welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast, co-hosted by Abby Fearing, the Badass Breastfeeder, and Dianne Cassidy, IBCLC.
Today's episode is brought to you by Spandice. Are you pregnant or just had a baby and battling back pain or need belly support? Say hello to Spandice. Each Spandice wrap comes with 2 therapy packs that you can use for hot or cold therapy that lasts up to 3 hours. And for badasses, today you get 20% off plus free shipping on your order when you use promo code BADASS at checkout. Check them out, spandIce.com/badass. That's spandicecom/BADASS. You can also find the link in our description.
Welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. This is Dianne, your lactation consultant.
And this is Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder.
I almost forgot our name for a minute. I was like, this is the... what the hell I'm doing.
What's our podcast?
What's our podcast called? Today we are going to talk about twins. Well, multiples.
Or triplets.
Whenever I think multiples,
or
I think
Octomom.
twins.
Did she breastfeed?
The Octomom? I don't know.
Remember
man.
her?
I do remember her.
Yeah.
Because didn't she have, didn't they send her all sorts of stuff? Weren't people just, sending her, she had people volunteering to be the nannies and they had diapers. They were funded completely. I'm like, damn it. Somebody needs to fund my children. This is crazy. But multiples.
Yeah. And the lucky thing about today's awesome topic is that Dianne actually breastfed twins.
I did. And that's how I always tell people that's how I ended up in this field. Because
tell us again, because they don't remember. I think we talked about this stuff in the beginning.
Yeah,
the first episode, but
yeah.
How did that get you into?
All right, so I will be absolutely honest, totally honest and upfront, and say that if I'd had my twins first, I don't know if I would have breastfed them. Honest to God, I think I would have been intimidated, and I'm only saying that because it is very, very doable and very, very manageable, and I'm proof of that. And I think a lot of people do go into it thinking that they can't. But I had already breastfed one baby very successfully, and I was like, I can't breastfeed one and not the others. It's like, who's going to get the car seat? I felt like I couldn't do that,
Right.
It wouldn't have been fair. They all had to have it. I would never have felt good about that. If I just
and that's true. If you breastfed one, then at least once you get through the first breastfeeding experience, it's kind of you know where to look for information. You know that you can figure it out,
right? And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna. It'll just have to be, it'll have to work out fine. And there was never a question in my mind about it. And
you were not a lactation consultant yet.
No, I was not. Okay. And I think that probably helped.
You were still in the army. Were you still in the army?
No, I was out by that point.
Okay.
So I was a stay-at-home mom.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, I'm going to
How old was your oldest?
2.
Oh, God.
He had just turned 2. He turned 2 in July, and I had the twins in November.
Wow.
So it was one of those things where he was like, Nathan, I stayed home with him because I had just gotten out of the army when I had him. I stayed home with him and we did everything together. He was attached to me. I had him on my back in the backpack. We went everywhere. Did everything together. And I was like, oh, I want to have, more kids, and I want my kids to be close in age so that they can grow up together and be close. And so then I get pregnant again, thinking that there'd be 2 years apart, and it was twins. So I was like, okay, this will be fun. 3 in 2 years, but what do you just take a deep breath and you do it. Mm-hmm. And there's twins in my family. That's the other people ask me that all the time, and that my mother's a twin. So it was,
oh, she is. Okay.
Yeah, my mom's a twin, and I have 3 older sisters, and nobody had them. So my mom was ecstatic because finally, it was the last shot. The last grandchildren, the last daughter, the last everything. So she was thrilled, but we all were. But everybody was like, "You're not going to breastfeed these twins, are you?"
I think, are people told what's the kind of because when you go to a doctor or something like that, they're just kind of telling you all kinds of nonsense. Were people saying well, you physically can't?
No, I think they were just thinking that because I had a 2-year-old And then there was going to be 2 babies, and how do you actually make that happen?
Mm-hmm.
And I said to people, I'm not buying diapers and formula for 2 babies. Like, that was my big thing. Like, I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to have 3 kids in diapers.
Yeah.
I'm not buying formula for 2 babies on top of that.
Oh God.
Like,
yeah.
no,
That's a good point.
It wasn't going to happen. And people were like, and I remember people asking me, like, aren't you afraid you're not going to have enough milk? That was everybody's fear.
That's got to be the big thing. It's
Yeah.
like there's not going to be enough milk for both babies.
And I said, no, I'm afraid I won't have enough time in the day. That was like my response. I never worried about the supply. And I did with my first, of course, in the very beginning when you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I did worry about supply. But with the twins, I was like, no, this is it. Like, there is no choice. It has to work. And it freaking sucked, man. First of all, I don't remember even seeing anybody in the hospital. I really don't. I don't remember seeing a lactation person. There's a couple things, and I had them by C-section because my daughter was upside down and she was the lower twin. And they won't let you have one vaginally like that, at least not here.
Mm-hmm.
So they were a C-section, and I remember the second night with them, that whole like cluster feeding second night chaos. And I was by myself, and they were crying and fussing and wanted to be held and wanted to nurse. And I was trying to do that. And my ex-husband had gone home with our son. And I'm like trying to hold these babies and trying to nurse them. And I had this C-section, and I'm by myself, and I'd pick one up and the other would cry, and I'd put the one down and try to pick the other one up. And I got them mixed up and didn't know who was who at one point. And like, I had to open their diaper to find out who was who.
Oh my God.
I was like beside myself, and somebody came in to help me. A nurse came in to help me. And I remember like, going home and stuff, but I don't remember. And I remember they wanted to keep one of them. They wanted to keep my son. And
why?
Because they told me he was at 10% loss. And I was like, I'm not leaving here with one baby.
Yeah.
No, that's not going to happen. I'm going home with them. That's crazy. I'm not doing that. But I don't remember anybody coming to see the crazy circus freak who's breastfeeding twins. Like, nobody came in. It's like, I think I would have remembered that.
Yeah.
And went home, and really, it was really hard. It took me.
Well, like even when you have one baby, they're like, somebody's like, time to breastfeed, like time to feed.
Right.
There was nobody there, like,
I don't remember seeing anyone. I really don't. And then it took us about a month to figure out how to get things rolling. And that was because I was by myself. I didn't have anybody that was trying to give me any guidance with that. And I remember going to my doctor, the pediatrician, and she was very nice. And she was like, well, you don't have to breastfeed them all the time. You could breastfeed one feed and bottle feed another. That's fine. And I think she was just trying to kind of, like help me in her own way. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I guess I'm just going to have to figure this out by myself, because that's not what I want to do either. So, and I did. Like, I figured it out.
Did it ever occur to you to just latch them on at the same time?
They wouldn't. And the reason, or I might have, but what I figured out what happened well for us. And this is what I tell moms of twins. If you can't figure out like how to wrap your head around it, babies, and you remember like when they're newborn, they're dozing, they're falling asleep, their hands are everywhere. You need to give them so much support because they're floppy. And so trying to latch 2 on at the same time can be really hard unless you're really coordinated like that. Or you have a lot of help if people maybe bringing one over to you or something.
They make those like fancy, like you see in the hospital, they have these super fancy pillows.
They do now. They're fantastic.
Which those are probably pretty new.
Yeah, they are for sure. So I always tell people, you know what, I And mine, I mean, they were two separate babies. They had no interest in feeding at the same time because they're two different babies. So, and especially like, okay, so one's up and wants to eat, and then I got to wake the other one up, and that one doesn't want to eat. They're just going to fall back to sleep. And then you're wasting more time trying to like balance these babies and get them eating and trying to stimulate them to stay awake to eat. Just feed one, put them down, feed the other one. Like, and that actually saved more time than trying to feed them both together. But this is stuff that you don't realize. That's something I
never would have thought about.
Yeah, you don't realize unless you've done it.
I thought that feeding them both at the same time would have been easier, but actually, now that you say that, it's actually, that sounds like way harder.
Once they're bigger, it is easier. But when they're small, when they're newborn, it's so hard to try to manage that.
Yeah, because I tandem nursed, but I could deal with one newborn, and then the other one I didn't have to even pay attention to.
Right.
So it's totally different. Breastfeeding multiples is very different from tandem nursing.
Yes, it is.
Interesting.
It is. It's very different. I have had moms, like when I was in the hospital, when I worked in the hospital, I had moms that were like so overwhelmed by the thought of the breastfeeding. And then the lactation consultant would come in, like it wasn't me, it was one of the other ones, would come in and be like, all right, today we're going to feed these babies at the same time. We're going to tandem nurse. And the mother was like, oh my God, I can't even wrap my head around that. And it was like too much for her. But it's like, if you haven't done it, you don't know what you're getting into. So it really is like, if you can find a lactation consultant or somebody, it doesn't even have to be like somebody to support you that has breastfed twins that can like know what you're doing. It would be so helpful. Because it's hard. And once you get it going and you get, like, we got into a routine and they were feeding, like I would feed one and, an hour and a half later I'd feed the other one. And that worked out really well for us. We did really good. And my daughter, she could go a little bit longer. Brandon had to be on a very like regular routine of eating. I could manipulate her schedule and it wouldn't throw her off too much because they're different personalities, like you just... Yeah. And we were fine. We made it work. And I mean, I was feeding probably 25 times a day. But
oh my God.
When you think about in the beginning like that. But I don't remember it being the only thing I ever did, because I had another one.
That's right.
I didn't you can make it work.
Yeah, you can.
It's not
Now,
horrible.
did you breastfeed them from... This is a question I see a lot under like pictures of people tandem nursing. Or breastfeeding twins. Did each have a breast, or did you switch?
No, I would switch them. So, and mine were always like, all my kids were one boob eaters. Were yours like that? Just one boob at a time, or one boob per feed?
No. They always had to switch.
I think mine were always pretty solid
and like one wanted to switch
per feed. So it's like I would feed one on one breast, and then the next breast I'd use the other, or the next feeding I'd use the other one. And I don't think I really paid too much attention to who was on who or who was where. And I have had moms that have fed twins that, all right, this baby gets the left and this baby gets the right. And then the next day they'll switch it. And I'm like, whatever works for you.
Right. I was going to say, either way, your body is responding to the baby.
Right.
So just like it's going to work whichever way you want to do it, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So just make it whatever's easiest.
Yeah. Well, however, and there really is, I mean, kind of like my mantra for the rest of breastfeeding, it's like there doesn't have to be any rules. It doesn't, it's whatever works for you. It doesn't have to be like, oh, you should be feeding each baby this amount of time at this intervals and blah, blah, blah. Like it really is whatever. They're two different babies that happen to be born at the same time.
That is such a like, yeah, I never thought about that either. It's like you really get like a lesson in like how you're born with a personality. Because you get like a newborn. Like, I mean, I had one and then 3 years later I had another and I was like, oh yeah, a newborn. But like the other one was so old by then that I didn't really remember every little nuance of his personality as a newborn.
Right.
But like if they were next to each other as newborns, they would have been so different.
And it's really cool, especially when it's boy girl, to see like the differences. and we always say, okay, girls are more advanced and like they really are. But
yeah, like they generally learn to move around quicker and speak quicker.
I mean, they just
right. Is
they
that
nurse
right?
and they nurse better. They always they nurse better. So it really and it was like my son was really the one who had to be way more tended to all the time. But the other really nice thing that people don't think about with twins is if you nurse them separately, you get individualized bonding time with each baby.
Well, and that's really,
you don't get that
really
with twins.
Thing too.
It's like an assembly line. You bathe them together, you dress them together, you change them together. Like everything happens together because that's just how it is. But if you're feeding them separately, you have that individualized one-on-one time with them that you don't get normally.
That's a really good point.
Even when you bottle feed them, you just stick a bottle in their mouth and you can feed them both at the same time. I mean, it's just, and I did pump and people helped me. Like in the evening, we would give them a bath and, I would pump and my ex-husband would help me feed one and I would feed one. And, and that worked out good for us. It was like just kind of the routine that we had down, but then all night and then the whole next day I would feed them, by myself. So they had like one bottle a day, and that was it. And then there was sometimes like my daughter would refuse it too. She would not. And I remember my ex handed her to me a couple times and being like, just feed her. I'm not going to fight with her. I'm like, fine, whatever. Like,
yeah.
But it really, like, once we got into it, it really was fine. And I was so proud. Like, and I'm sure you felt like this. And I always tell moms like this too. Like, you look at them as they're starting to grow and it's like, look at what I did. Like, that is all me. I made that happen.
Yeah, and sometimes you're like, "Oh dear God, I made that happen."
I know.
Like
now, yeah. Oh my God, it's just...
you're like, "How much of this is my fault?"
I know. Oh my God, what did I do to them? But it's hard, but it's so worth it. And people, I think, get pregnant with twins, and they don't have anybody saying to them, yeah, absolutely, you can breastfeed. That's totally manageable.
Well, and that's the thing. And a lot of times they have the opposite. They do have people telling them that they can't. That it'll be too hard, that you probably won't have enough milk.
You'll need help.
You're not gonna, that it's just not, it's not possible.
Right.
And again, this is one of our sort of like cultural things that we do is we're just like, well, no, you can't do that.
No. And and of course people are going to want to come and help you. And like my sisters would come over and hang out with me and hold a baby or whatever. And, my mom would come and help cook a couple of meals and help clean up and help with my son. But, people do not need to give bottles to be helpful. There are so many other things that they can do. Yeah.
And it's actually, I mean, like you have to stop and pump in order to give a bottle. And like, that's not fun.
No, it sucks.
There's just, there's so many other things that, just like holding a baby for a minute really goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. And just so you can get a nap, yeah.
Right. Or just so you can just stand there and not hold a baby for a second. Like, I mean, like, yes, holding a baby is wonderful, but it's also nice to just like stand there for a second. And I remember like with Exley, when he was first born, and I was like wearing him around all the time, chasing Jack. At the end of the day, I'd put him down on the bed and I was like, such relief.
I know.
To just like have him like not touching me. And again, he was touching me 99% of the time, but like that 1% was kind of like, ooh, I know. Like, wiggle around, do a couple jumping jacks or something.
I know it. It's like freedom. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I had an admin. Her name is Davina. She's like pretty internet famous. She breastfed triplets.
Oh my God. God bless her.
She actually extended breastfed triplets, and I say breastfed past tense. I don't even know if they're weaned yet. They're about 6 years old, and they breastfed for years and years and years, and might still be breastfeeding. But yeah, she did a couple of like guest blogs on my website and would talk about like just like kind of the like the assembly line nature of it, and like there was always one who was she was pumping, and like there was always one that was they would kind of rotate, I think, taking a bottle. Because by the time you're done feeding all three of them, it's time to start with the first one again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're just doing it all the time. But she did it, she did it. And she had, and yes, you have enough milk. So like, here's the thing is that your body makes enough milk for whoever is drinking the milk.
Exactly.
And actually, the more milk that comes out of your breast, the more milk your body's going to make.
And I tell people that all the time. I'm like, okay, when I had one baby, I made enough milk for one baby. When I had two babies, I made enough milk for two babies.
Right.
Because that's what I told my body I needed to do. And that there was never a question about that. It just happened.
Right. Your body just responds.
It just responds.
The breast is getting empty, just starts making more milk.
Yep.
And it'll just keep doing that.
It just responds.
It's pretty magical.
And once you get into a routine where things are working and you're just kind of going with it, like, it's not terrible. And if you think about it, it's not, I mean, obviously it's not forever. It's like, and once they start foods and once they, like things start to, they do stretch out, babies don't feed 12 times a day for the first year,
Sure.
like they do stretch out and, you do get those breaks after, those first couple of months that are really overwhelming, but it's so short-lived when you think about like what you're getting back in this investment. And it's just, and they're not still breastfeeding. Obviously they're 15. So it's like this, we grew out of this phase, but it really, like, I would never.
How long did they breastfeed?
They were about 14 months. All my kids were about 14 months. And it was one of those things where, and if anybody listened to our podcast on weaning and like distracted babies, they were to the point where, of course, Nathan was 2 or he had just turned 3. The twins were, 14 months, 15 months. And they wanted to like be off playing. And I remember trying to like put him in my lap and breastfeed him in the morning when they got up. But of course I'm sitting downstairs where the other two are playing and there's, TV on or things happening. And they didn't want to be doing that. They wanted to be off playing. And I never thought, okay, if I can go up to a room, and I had nobody to ask either.
Sure.
So I'm sure they would have still nursed, at night and in the morning if we had like done the whole quiet, undistracted thing, but they just kind of like went ahead and
you just assumed they were done.
I assumed they were done. Yeah. And, then once I became a lactation consultant and I learned better or I learned differently, I was like, because I was sad. I wasn't ready to give it up yet. I really wasn't. I was not ready.
And you hear this a lot of people like, oh, my baby's 8 months, weaned at 8 months. That doesn't happen.
No, that doesn't happen.
And not to, that frustrates a lot of people to hear that because, they're like, I'm trying to get my baby to breastfeed and he's not breastfeeding. He's 8 months. He's done. He won't breastfeed. But the thing is, there's other things going on. Like maybe he's teething or he's going through like a developmental thing or, like we did a whole thing on distracted babies. Like there's just things that go on that take them away from breastfeeding for a minute. But you can, if you want, you don't have to. You can kind of manipulate it back to the breast. Yeah. By just waiting it out a little bit. And like you said, going to the quiet places.
But if you don't know that they're not weaning.
But if you don't know, then there's nothing,
And mine were all, like, it was funny because when this happened, when they pretty much stopped breastfeeding, it was right correlated with when they started to walk. So it's like they were getting very busy. They had just started to like walk steadily on their own. And they were like, I'm going to go play. And they had the 3 of them together and, they were off playing. And so I just was like, oh yeah, they're weaned. They're old enough now, whatever. Because I really did not like when I breastfed, I really had no information. It wasn't like the internet was just starting to blow up with Google at that point. And who had time? Like I didn't have time to go looking for information at all. I didn't have time to be in the Mom of Twins Club or anything.
Well, you don't know. Yeah. I mean, you don't even know the questions to ask. Like in the beginning, it's just so,
and it's
so chaotic.
Yeah.
You don't even, and you don't know that there are questions to ask. You're just like, this is how it is. And this is all that I think exists. So how do you know to even, there's all kinds of things. So I'm like, well, I didn't question it. And it's not because I'm an idiot and don't know how to question things. Like, I didn't even know that you were supposed to question that.
Right. I didn't know it was
this
a
is just
thing.
like totally normal to me. It seems normal. So, you just don't know.
I mean, and there was a lot of things that, as a mom of twins, and when I see moms of twins, I don't get a lot of moms of twins, but the ones that I have had that I've supported have been really, really successful. And those are ones that really are actively looking to find the support. They want the support for their babies. They really do. And they're looking actively for it. And then you have your group of moms that are pregnant with twins that, like you said, they're being told you can't breastfeed them. You're not going to have enough milk. It'll be too hard. It's, too much work. But it's so
and again,
manageable.
the message that your body just doesn't know how to deal with, the situation that it's been being given. And it's not true. Your body knows what to do.
Oh my God, it totally knows what to do. And adapts
It knows
to
way better than you do. And the only thing that you do when you interfere is you mess it up.
Oh my God, you mess it up so bad.
You
really do. It just skews the whole process.
And I think and the best example of that is the whole schedule thing. Of just, you got to make sure that you're feeding every 2 hours. And so, and it's like, well,
We'll screw it up.
Don't worry about it. Just put your baby on your boob and let the whole thing happen.
It's, you don't need to be, there doesn't need to be a schedule of any sort of any kind.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work like that. Because your body doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't. And that's, your baby's probably most likely going to want to breastfeed more than every 2 hours. And then you're going to end up with, that way you can end up with some issues.
And I think another thing too that happens with multiples, and it would be interesting, well, you might even know this about your admin Davina that this happened with, or that had the triplets. Often they're not full term. So that throws a whole different, set of rules into the game. And mine, luckily, I give birth to babies who never want to come out of the womb because they all have to be forced. Even the twins. Like I never went into labor with them. And they did my section at 38 weeks and never went into labor, and they were huge. And it was like, how could you stand each other in there? I don't know how they could. I don't know how they did it. Like they were 16 pounds together.
Oh my God.
So I don't know how.
Oh my God.
They didn't push themselves out of there. It was crazy.
You must have been enormous.
It was huge. Nobody
That's
had
very, very big for twins, isn't it?
Yeah, they were 8. My daughter was 8'4". My son was 7'13". And
wow, that has to be like off the charts of norms.
Yeah, and they were each over 20 inches.
Wow.
So it was, and nobody was aware. I don't know how that happened.
Oh,
I don't know.
Nobody knew. Oh.
Nobody knew. And I mean, and I was having ultrasounds like weekly, and nobody did a weight guesstimate on them. And I don't know. Like I'd meet people now, and they're like, "I'm 36 weeks, and the baby weighs this many pounds." And this many ounces.
Yeah, well, now, yeah.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they're sticking. Yeah, they're doing all kinds of things.
I know, but nobody had any idea. People are like, "Weren't you on bed rest?" I'm like, "No, I was out shopping." Like I had a 2-year-old. Like, I didn't even. No, yeah, they were heavy, and I peed a zillion times a day, but. It was, I don't know how they could stand it, but I was very fortunate that mine were full term and they were big babies, because it would be really hard if you have 36 weekers, you have, 35
because then there's
weekers.
other issues, right? Yeah.
They're really sleepy. They're, they might be in the hospital a little bit longer, which might be better because then you can have a little bit more help with breastfeeding if you have lactation there at the hospital. But that was one of the, really good benefits for me. But again, like, I don't know if Davina ever told you if her triplets were really premature or.
I don't remember exactly, but I'm sure triplets. I doubt that they were 40-week 9-pound babies.
Yeah, no,
they
probably were early, but it still is manageable. You can still do it. You really the support is so important, though.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you have to go in understanding that it is going to work if you want to do it. And if you don't want to do it, that's a different thing. But if you want to do it, then you got to understand that it can work and your body's going to work, Your body's going to have enough milk for them, and it's going to work if you just get into it. Yeah. And, like, when you have twins, that's the thing about having twins is, like, that's just the situation you have at hand. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not like, oh, this is doubly hard. Like, maybe it is doubly hard, but you don't know that because you just have twins. That's all you know.
Yeah. You know what's one of the really nice things about it, too? I don't tend to tell people this too much, but they were very good sleepers. And
don't tell anybody that.
I know I shouldn't, but you know why? I'm sure why. They stayed together. I had them in the same crib the whole time.
Yeah.
So, and they were, you know, which I always encourage moms of twins, like they've always been together. They've been together in the womb. Why would you separate them? Why would you separate them? And in the hospital, they used to make us separate twins. And I used to hate that.
Oh.
But I used to tell the mom, if you want to put them in the same bassinet, you can. But I cannot, as an employee here, I cannot put them in the same bassinet. But they do so much better when they're together. They calm each other.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It must be very alarming to be in a womb with somebody and then suddenly they're not there.
Right. I mean, they would just calm each other. You know, it was very, and you see stuff like that on the internet all the time. Like I just saw this one video going around on Facebook recently with like these newborn twins. And once they put them next to each other, they stop crying. And, you know, and it is like, you see, it happens all the time. But they stayed in the same crib for the first year. And then Brandon got bigger than Jessica and he rolled over on her. And she was like, ah! Like,
oh, God.
And I went in there and he was like laying on her and she's like, oh, like a turtle trying to get off her shell.
Aww.
And so then I separated them. But even then, like once I separated them, then they didn't do well. And then they would throw things back and forth to each other's cribs. And, you know, like, it was really funny. So then I just like put them in a toddler bed together. And they slept in the same bed until probably they were 13. Like it just,
wow.
Yeah. Which freaked my husband out when I met Tom. They were 5 and he was like, oh my God, they're boy girl. They sleep together. And I'm like, they're twins. Like they're fine. They're
siblings.
Wrong. Yeah. They're siblings or twins. They're fine. But we'd always try to separate them and then they would always go back together. And it's like, okay, fine. Just stay together. But they, I really believe honestly that's why they did so well was because they were just together and it was their calm and their comfort for each other.
Yeah, so that's so awesome.
Yeah, I always tell people, and sometimes they say, oh, but don't they wake each other up? But they do better. You know, my twins sleep better by themselves. I'm like, okay. But it just, to me, I just always feel like, you know what? They don't know what it's like to not have each other.
Yeah.
So it's just keep them together. And when they're newborn,
in a safe space.
Right, exactly. When they're newborn, where are they going? They're not rolling. You know,
no, they're not. Exactly. There's no,
swaddle them up and stick them next to each other. And that's what I mean. Like we used to have them swaddled and they'd be next to each other and they would literally, like, I have pictures of them as newborns with Brandon's lips on Jessica's nose. Like literally they were like, that's how they were. And their hands curled up with each other and they wanted to be together all the time because that's what they knew. They were 2 8-pound babies in the womb. Like they weren't on top of each other the whole time.
Right.
You know, I mean,
and they're the best of friends now, aren't they? Are they constantly cuddling and holding hands?
Oh yeah, constantly. They do. They're funny because, you know, of course they're teenage, but and I know that they have connection to each other for sure, but they have that sibling right. They pick at each other and things like that, but they are very connected to each other, which is nice. It's like you can't. And Jessica's even told me sometimes, like, he gets on my nerves, but I don't let anybody else to do anything to him, you know, like.
Sure.
Kind of thing. And she would, like, when he was in preschool, or not preschool, but when they were in grade school, you know, she would always be like, somebody bothering you. She'd be stomping in, checking on him, making sure he's doing what he's supposed to do. But it definitely, it was worth it. You know, it was definitely worth it. And I really feel like too, just being able to have that little one-on-one time with them when I was nursing them was so good for me to be able to bond with them too, because and I had hard postpartum. That was really a struggle for me. And I think that really helped me to be able to bond with them too, because I just, you know, being able to hold them each and snuggle with them each separately for a few minutes every day made a huge difference.
Yeah, totally. So you can do it, guys.
You can do it.
If you have multiples, it'll work. It can work if you want it to work.
So when Abby and I were first talking about doing this podcast on multiples, I asked her, like, does anybody write in on her Facebook page or anything like that about multiples? And she said, really not too many. And I like, Abby, you're very optimistic because you were like, I guess nobody has problems. And I'm like, they're not doing it. That's why.
They probably just don't breastfeed. Yeah. That makes more sense.
I really hope that like somebody out there is listening to this that, has
well, and I know people
Let
do
us
because a
know.
lot of people, maybe people don't ask me a lot of questions about it, but I sure get a lot of pictures. People send me a lot of pictures of them breastfeeding their twins.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And they're always very popular because, everybody loves to see twins nursing.
Like,
people love it.
Yeah, people love it. Oh my God, yeah, this is crazy. But
yeah, it's just like people see it and it's like, oh my God, that's just so cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just fine. But yeah, so that's my twin story. So everybody, you can do it. You can do it.
You can do it. If you have problems, let us know.
Let us know. If you want to talk to a lactation consultant that nurse twins, you can feel free to reach out to me.
Email Diane.
Yeah, definitely. Because I'll encourage you through it. It is. And I always tell people, give yourself a good few weeks to really figure it out. It takes time to figure it out, and that's okay. It'll all even out, but you have to give yourself a little bit of breathing room too.
And that's going to be the case with whatever number of babies you have.
Absolutely.
You have got to give it a chance because it's going to be crazy at first. It just is.
Yeah. But you can do it.
You can.
And next week, we are going to talk about what those twins did to my body when I had them. No, we're going to talk about, what are we talking about? Next
body
week?
changes. Body changes during breastfeeding.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, of course, pregnancy and everything else, which will probably come into play. But
but we're going
to talk about it. We're going to put it out there. It's one of those taboo topics. We're talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Today's episode is brought to you by Spandice. Are you pregnant or just had a baby and battling back pain or need belly support? Say hello to Spandice. Each Spandice wrap comes with 2 therapy packs that you can use for hot or cold therapy that lasts up to 3 hours. And for badasses, today you get 20% off plus free shipping on your order when you use promo code BADASS at checkout. Check them out, spandIce.com/badass. That's SPAND-ICE.com/BADASS. You can also find the link in our description.